Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. The date of the most anticipated car launch of the 2023 season has been confirmed, with Mercedes revealing when the W14 will arrive, and also potentially some hints as to whether it's going to stay silver or is it going to go back to the black design that saw a fair bit of dominance in 2020 and 21. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Firstly, another quick update on this from Drive to Survive, confirming February the 24th is going to be the date where Season 5 arrives from this past 2022 season. Will Buxton's back with all the other guys. Now, of course, one thing to note here, you guys actually probably saw if we rewind a little bit, is actually Max Verstappen is sitting in the chair at some point. And as I say, how are you feeling about being in the chair? We've seen Verstappen make multiple comments over the last couple of years, really, about Netflix, making up stories, this type of stuff. Not so happy with them. Of course, they had the whole Red Bull row with Sky Sports earlier this season as well, after Ted Kravitz made some comments. But yeah, he got involved in this one, so we'll see how that goes. But nonetheless, one thing to note. Now, let's talk Mercedes then. So this was confirmed, a video they put out actually today that looks like this. So this is the W13, because otherwise, you know, they'd be giving away too much. This is this year's car, right? Or last year's car. It is now 2022's W13. The W14 is now this year's car, and what it's going to look like, how dissimilar it's going to be. We know that last year, Red Bull, when they launched their car, it was basically just the spec car that the FIA had come up with, and they put their livery on it. And Mercedes at the time did some tweet that was like, oh, you know, Red Bull taking the mick of it. And when they launched their car, they actually revealed what their actual car would look like. But then when they got to Bahrain, they introduced the no side pod thing, and that really did turn a lot of heads, obviously. Didn't work out performance-wise, but apparently they're going to stick with it. There's a few changes, especially to the rear of the car. The way the rear of the car kind of tapers in massively is potentially going to get changed around, but the no side pod's probably going to stay. The floor is going to be very different as well, so it's going to look a bit like the W13, probably quite a lot like the W13, but nonetheless, this car is being laid to rest, and they move on to this year's car. Now, this is the graphic they put out on their kind of official Mercedes-AMG page, which is the following: 15th of February 2023, the F1 W14 is revealed. So you could have said, okay, maybe they should have done it on the 14th for W14, but you know, whatever. Ferrari already have that date locked up. Now, I just thought this graphic was kind of interesting because there's no silver on here apart from the logo itself. It's pretty much just black and the Petronas blue, or whatever they call this color, basically. So, you know, I don't know. People want to know, first of all, is the car going to be quick? The other thing people are really interested in is whether the car's going to be silver again or whether it's going to go back to black. Because if you guys remember, in 2020, they introduced the black livery. People really consider it to be like the Darth Vader livery, because there's this, it's a pretty big video on YouTube. I think it's maybe a short or something, but there's a few of them floating around where Hamilton drives out in Austria for kind of testing and stuff in the new black livery W11. It looks pretty ominous, and of course that car was just the best Formula 1 car ever in terms of pure performance, dominated the whole season, pretty much shortened season because of the pandemic, and they kept the black livery design going into 2021, and then they turned it around, went back to the silver arrows for 2022. I don't really mind either way, to be honest, but some people want the black livery to return because it's kind of a sign of the Mercedes dominance, and was kind of, when Mercedes were at the peak of their powers in 2020, they had this black livery. People have said, oh, going back to the silvers hurt them somehow, and I think, honestly, the W13 would have looked very nice in a black livery anyway, so they might go back to it. I think they initially went for the black livery just because it was like, you know, well, sure, of diversity and Black Lives Matter support and stuff like this. I think that was the intention with it initially, but you know, then a couple of years they went back to the silver arrows, which is understandable, and I do wonder whether they would go back to the black livery unless they were really confident. Like, I don't know if that plays into their mindset at all, but the black livery has, for Mercedes from 2020 and 2021, some you know, heritage in success, and they've got to be rather confident, I would say, in the success of their car to put a black livery back on. So we'll see if they do, and if they do, maybe that's a sign of something. But I thought this graphic was a little bit interesting because they might have added more silver in here if the car was actually going to be silver. Of course, this is what the W13 looks like, but yeah, a few years ago we had a different design, and the silver looks nice in the W13 for sure, but the black livery, I think if a lot of people think, okay, Mercedes over the last few years, in the previous regulations, what car do you think of? You probably think of this one, which is the W11 from, yeah, this is Hamilton driving a couple of years ago now. So yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think in the comments below? Would you like to see it go back to the black livery or retain the silver livery? My theory is they'll keep the silver livery, but who knows? I think that graphic is a little bit interesting, implying there might be a little bit more to this than meets the eye. And also what they say in the tweet thread, we're going all in. Now, of course, they're not going to not go all in necessarily, right? They're obviously trying to win everything, but I thought this phrasing was a little bit interesting. They could have said anything else, but yeah, we're going all in kind of, I mean, when you go all in, it's kind of like a, you know, poker term, let's just say, where you're risking it a fair bit for maximum reward. So maybe what they feel like, I don't know if this is reading into it way too much here, but maybe there's an element of, The W14 is a bit of a risky design again. They're doubling down on the no side pod concept. Presumably that may or may not work. They obviously feel very confident that it will, and if it works out, it's going to pay off mega. If it doesn't work out, it's going to be another tough season for Mercedes. Maybe that's the intention here, that they're not trying to copy Red Bull or anything, or copy Ferrari and have a car that's very good but second best or third best. They're trying to, have the best car in the world by taking their own philosophy, but it has its own downsides and risks. Maybe that's one thing to look at. So these are all the launch dates currently confirmed. Williams on the 6th of February. Now that is a season launch, they said, not necessarily a car reveal. They will reveal their livery. They haven't necessarily confirmed if they'll actually reveal what the car looks like. They probably won't. And then a week after that, we've pretty much got Alfa Tauri, Aston Martin, McLaren, and then Mercedes are the latest so far, apart from actually Alpine, and then Red Bull still to be determined, with the other ones following on soon with the further announcements. I do hope that we get some crazy car reveals this year. I know back in the day there used to be some crazy ones like this Renault one with the sugar babes, I think. But you don't really tend to get this type of stuff anymore, unfortunately, as entertaining as these things used to be. And also Hamilton suggesting that he's hoping it's not a two-way battle, he's hoping it's even up to a five-way battle, which, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I'm sure that a part of Hamilton wants it to be a two-way battle between him and George Russell for the championship with the dominant Mercedes W14. Reality is probably not going to happen, but I think he speaks for all the fans here when he's like, look, at least three teams getting in the mix. Because last season, there was only really Brazil where all three teams were actually competitive and could be fighting for all the places on the podium. And, the rest of the season was sometimes a little bit underwhelming, it's got to be said. Couple of quick updates for you guys as well. Rather big one here for Silverstone, just because obviously it's an absolute mega weekend in Silverstone, the amount of attendees. A lot of people turn up the day before the Grand Prix even begins, or the Grand Prix weekend begins, to get, camping setups and all this. So I think what they're going to try and do, this isn't a change to the F1 structure, it'll still be practice, qualifying, race. But I think on the Thursday, they're going to bring extra things in, extra motorsport stuff happening, just to make it so that there's even more going on for the weekend, which is good as well. And also a big update from Zach Brown on the potential of what the FIA might do for drivers who deliberately, or let's say not deliberately, it's sometimes difficult to tell, bring out red flags in qualifying. We know, of course, this is really kicked off in part by the incident back in Monaco, where Perez, did he intentionally spin, did he not intentionally spin, who really knows? There was a fair bit of discussion on that, not really at the time, but after the Verstappen-Perez incident in Brazil, where he then raised the possibility, or the possibility was raised, that he was taking revenge for Perez deliberately crashing out to mean that Max Verstappen would have to start behind him. Who knows if that's true? But regardless, there was implications from even Carlos Sainz that, like, he probably put it in the wall deliberately, and this happened a lot. There's going to be a good couple of times last season and a good couple of times coming up this season where drivers bring out yellows or red flags, and there's a question as to whether they did it intentionally or unintentionally. Even George Russell in Brazil was quite an interesting one, because, in qualifying there, he had a decent lap in the first time, then he went off into the runoff area, brought out the yellow flag, and then at that point, he did that weird spin, didn't he? Like, he went on into the gravel, and that wasn't necessarily unexpected. He broke a bit late, couldn't get the car slowed down, went to the gravel, and then when he was in the gravel, he then spun by accident, apparently by accident, by getting his tires onto the wet bit of the tarmac on the right hand side there. So that was a bit like a little bit suspect, you could argue there, but there's no real punishment for this, right? If you do that, okay, maybe it's intentional, maybe it's not, but whatever, it is what it is. You just run with the qualifying times as they were set at that point in time. Now, other motorsports, IndyCar, they have their other rules where if drivers, whatever the situation is, they bring out a red flag for whatever reason, either their fastest time or their two fastest times get deleted. And one way to do this might be to say, look, if you bring out a red flag, your fastest qualifying time for that session is gone. So, effectively you would be starting 10th, or you'd be starting, let's say it was on your second flying lap, you would start based on the time you set on your first flying lap, or whatever the case is. So that's Zach Brown of McLaren's perspective here. I'm sure he sees what's happening in other, motorsport as well, and what Formula 1 might do about it. But I do think there's got to be some deterrent for this, whether it's bringing out a yellow, whether it's bringing out a red flag, because it can be used, has been used, and probably will still be used in the future to gain an unfair competitive advantage. So very much enjoyed your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.